Hello and welcome to a Community Futures Entre-Corp HR workshop put on in collaboration with our friends over at Alberta Labour and Immigration and our Workforce Development Officer. Community Futures also receives funding from the Government of Canada, and we would like to acknowledge those two funders in helping us bring this important skill set to you. So a couple years ago, the Brood Survey identified in our region that we needed to help our businesses build HR capacity. As many of us, I know I owned a small business and it wasn't in the budget to have an HR person on staff or to bring in a consultant CPHR. So we're really happy to bring you these facilitators from across the province and locally and help you build up your HR capacity and skills within your business. We hope that this makes your workplace safer, healthier, happier, and more productive. We're going through extraordinary change right now, and you're going to enjoy hearing from facilitators to help you understand and work with everything from gig workers to mental health, resiliency, finding purpose, hazard assessments, and a number of other things. So thank you so much for joining us. It's our pleasure to have you on board. Please share them with your friends, watch them at any time you need. And thank you again to our funding partners and the facilitators who have done such a great job on these. Take care.
I'd like you to remember three words today. The first one is purpose, the second one is well-being, and the third one is profitability. I'm just trying to figure out how I get myself down, Mike, into the center of the screen.
You are, cameras are all on you. You're the speaker, so everybody should be looking at you. If you don't see you when you speak, it's just a setting. But if, let's ask Kristen now that she's got her mask off. Can you give me a thumbs up if you see Dana? There we go. Awesome.
Okay, we're good.
Carry on.
Sounds good. So three words that I'd like you to remember. The first one is purpose, the second one is well-being, and the third one is profitability. And those aren't three words that generally get strung together. And we're going to use a thread to string those three words together to make sense. And we're going to use the concept of mental well-being, mental wellness throughout the program and tie it into that whole area of employee engagement. So before we get going, a couple of things. One, you should have received this in your email and printed it off. If not, Mike has got it there for you that you can look on the side of your screen. So it's a workbook that I put together for you to follow along. You can make notes in it. The second thing that I asked you to bring was a rubber band. So hopefully you have a rubber band with you. If not, well, you could pretend you have a rubber band and we will use that later on. So again, how many people can repeat those three words for me? And so we're looking at purpose and well-being and profitability. One of the things that I just illustrated to you was it's very difficult to remember something when someone tells you to remember it, when all of a sudden you're flooded with some additional information that's important and you need to remember it now. And so we know in our stress levels that ability to recall and remember things gets more difficult with the higher the level of stress and the farther we are in terms of being off purpose. So there's a quote on the front page of the handout. It's by Charles Kettering. And it's the Wright brothers flew right through the smoke screen of impossibility. And I like that quote. It's one of my all-time favorites because they didn't let the paradigm of the day get in the way of them determining that they could create an airplane that would fly people. And their mission basically was to be able to help people travel farther in the Americas in order to see their families. So today, we're not necessarily trying to fly through a smoke screen, but we certainly are in an information blizzard, even more so now with the state of the economy and COVID. And so that information blizzard hits us at about 4 billion, that's billion with a B, seconds per minute. And our mind is only capable of about, bits per second. And our mind is only capable of, on average, using about 120 bits per second. And as I'm talking to you, I'm using up 60 of my 20 bits. And as you're listening to me, you're using up 20 of your 60 bit or 60 of your 120 bits. So again, we have a lot of information, and I hope throughout the program as we work through that we get some clarity on the concept of purpose and employee engagement. So if you'll join me, I'm turning over to page 2. And there are the three words that I would like you to remember: purpose, wellness, and profitability. The first one is purpose, and that's a sense of having a greater meaning in your life, contributing to something that's bigger than your life. It's an external focusing trait that we have inborn that we need to contribute and help make the world a better place. And so when that's missing, things get a little cloudy and we become less engaged. Our mental wellness starts to suffer. The second part of that circle that we're trying to put together is the employee wellness. And I look at employee wellness in two aspects of it. One is the physical wellness, making sure that we're physically healthy with good diet, lots of rest. But the other important part to me, because of my personal journey through mental health, is the mental well-being. And it's often the part that's overlooked. So that whole concept of mental well-being, when we're on our game and we have a positive well-being, then our physical well-being is also positive. So I'm looking at both sides of this, and physical and mental, but the thread, as I mentioned, will be through mental wellness, will be mentioned throughout the entire webinar. When we look over at the third one, I threw in a word that really doesn't link up to those two when you don't think about it for a couple of minutes, but it's profitability. And there's two types of profitability that we have. The first one is the profitability of the traditional sense of business with share dividends and profit and dollars and cents and bank ratios and all of the things that show that we're a healthy functioning company. And sometimes people look at profitability as being a dirty word in terms of business when people are not in the business. But employers and business owners like myself, we jumped into business to make a profit. We contribute to the needs of our family. We contribute to the needs of all of our employees. And we also contribute to the community with some of the money that we're managing to make in difficult situations. So there's another type of profitability, and that's the one that I really want to focus on and throughout the webinar. And again, it relates to mental wellness, and it's the profitability of investing in our people. If we don't invest in our people, particularly in the 4 key areas that we're going to talk about in the webinar, then mental well-being starts to go down. Engagement definitely goes up when people see that we're investing time and resources into them while they're on their job. So in the middle, I have left a thief, and I call him public enemy number 1. And you'll discover public enemy number 1 in a short time. But right now, public enemy number 1 in North America robs businesses and organizations of $356 billion. So that's every year, and that's the Gallup poll. The latest poll was in 2019. 356 billion, and yet we don't necessarily feel it leaving our organizations. It simply is missing at the end of the year, and sometimes we just don't know why. And as we get to the end of the webinar, we'll know 4 techniques that will help us to regain those costs and have a healthy workplace. So again, Mike said you can throw your questions into the chat and he'll be monitoring, so that's great. For me, I'm going to move over to page 3, and the whole area that we want to talk about from the employer standpoint is employee engagement. And I've written a book on the subject called The Three-Legged Stool: Employee Engagement Equals Higher Profits. And so I had to do a lot of research in writing this book, and I also finished a master's about 8 years ago in human behavior, which is really my core area of studying and learning what I want to do. So if you look on the page 3, you'll see that there are 3 levels of employee engagement. As I was doing the reading for the research, there are authors out there who use 4, sometimes 5. I chose 3 because it's nice and simple. And the first one is in green. It's the goal, where we want to be. It's the go place. These are our engaged employees, and they represent about 25% of our employees in the North American workforce. And if you look at the picture on the side, when employees are engaged, the wheels and gears of your organization are engaged and working and moving smoothly along. What does an engaged employee look like? The engaged employee is a person who wants to come to work. They have great problem-solving skills. They're willing to go the extra mile. They're loyal. We have no problem retaining them. They're always willing to learn new tasks. They're always willing to help out other employees in the situation. So these are our highly engaged employees. And it's unfortunate that it only roughly about 1 in 4 of those are represented in the North American economy. We move down a bit into the blue zone. This is the caution zone, and these are the unengaged employees, and that represents a significant part of the workforce, 60% of the entire workforce, according to Gallup. And if you look at the little diagram on the side, you'll notice that sometimes with unengaged employees, we get a wrench thrown into the works that may slow down the production of the company or the productivity of the company or the efficiency of the company, but it doesn't bring it to a grinding halt. And unengaged employees are a unique band. They're very difficult to identify, but here's an example of what you might see with an unengaged employee over a period of time. Well, I guess I'm at work for another day. I got through here yesterday. I think I can do it today. I'm not sure what my job has for me. Maybe I'll go get a coffee. So the unengaged employee is really not truly aligned with the values of the company or the purpose of the company. And there may be other mitigating circumstances. They may not have a clear job description. They may not know what their boundaries are. They may not know what their expectations are. But in general, they're tired. There's a term that we use for this group, and it's called presenteeism. And that's opposed to the term absenteeism when people are just not at work. This group has some level of absenteeism, but the other group is the presenteeism, and that's where we're at work and we're less than productive. So let me give you a common example with a physical ailment. All of us have had to come to work. Bad example probably in the COVID, but in the past, we've come to work, we've had a bad cold, but we knew we had a job to get through. We knew we had a meeting to get to that day. And so we came to work, or we had a sore back, or we were upset with something that happened at home, or got cut off at a driver, and we just weren't in the right mood for being at work. We're unengaged and we're in that presenteeism. So we're just not as productive as we could be. Doesn't mean that we're not an engaged employee on a regular basis, but some circumstances cause us to be less than productive. That describes this group pretty much on a daily basis, and they're very difficult to find. And sorry, not to find, but to identify in your workplace. However, when I look at this group, I look at this group as an opportunity for moving people from being unengaged to engaged, or sometimes watching them slip from unengaged into the actively disengaged group. So this group is a group of opportunity where people just need a nudge. They need a little push. They need to have a nice performance conversation. Is there anything I can do for you? How's your job going? Is there anything that we can do to help you use more of your natural strengths on the job? So these people can be moved up into the engaged workforce with a little bit of help from their supervisors, their managers, and their owners. The dangerous part of the employee engagement is the red zone down at the bottom, and that is the actively disengaged. And if you look at the diagram to the left, you'll see a pile of gears. And that represents the work of disengaged employees, and they represent about 15% of the workforce. So not a big number, but very significant. These can be the toxic people in your workplace. This group is definitely not engaged in what they're doing. And what do they look like? Their core purpose is to undo the work that engaged people have done and unengaged people have done throughout the day. Their core purpose for the actively disengaged is to undo that, to slow the process down, to be a cog in the wheel that's not making it work right, to disassemble something that's not working right. So what do these people look like? They can be aggressive, they can be irritable, they can be negative, they can be friendly, they can be on their game. They would probably be the first ones to, when things go wrong, to point out that it wasn't their fault, but when things go right, they were probably the first ones to say, well, that's something that I did for the group. So we've got an actively disengaged group at about 15%. So just in a brief format then, we've got this group of people that we're going to work with. And I just wanted you to get a sense of what each of those groups look like. Some of you already have probably a better handle on it from your reading. This is just a short version. So if you have any questions, again, I'm going to move on. You can throw them into the chat room for Mike. And I'm going to move over to page 4. In this particular area, I'm going to bring you to a new concept. I hope it's new to you, that there's a difference between change and transition. Change is the physical aspects and behaviors that we see above a particular change. So let's look at the pandemic as a change. We were forced into it in March with the lockdowns and the securities. A lot of physical things happened. We were locked down to stay in our houses. People had to move home. Those businesses that were up had to put all kinds of safety measures in to protect their businesses and their clients and their employees and their families. So all of these are the physical aspects of that change that we're going through. And we'll talk about that again in a couple of minutes. But underlying all of this, this is the physical behavioral part. Underlying all of this is the mental, the psychological things that are going on in our mind as we're working through these changes. So the fear that came with not knowing what was happening, the lack of knowing if we had the skills to cope with this, the discouragement of how long it's taking for it to go to get through, hopefully to an end that brings us back to a comfort zone that we're back on track again with. So it's the underlying aspects, the emotional aspects that represent transition. And transition is a process that was described by William Bridges in a book, ironically called just Transition. So he set up 3 zones, and I continue to use this throughout my coaching for probably the last 20 years. The first zone is the comfort zone. And in that comfort zone is where we are today. And then the second zone is the uncertainty zone. That's the how and the what. And right now we're in the uncertainty zone. We got pulled out of our current comfort zone. We literally got yanked out of it and plunked into this uncertainty zone. And in the uncertainty zone, we have a level of fear and doubt and surprise, and we don't know what's happening to us. We don't know where we're going to be going. And so there's that sense of fear inside, or trepidation, I guess is a better word, of being inside that uncertainty zone. However, again, this side also has another flip side to it, and it's also a very creative zone. And so we've seen how creative businesses have had to have been over the course of this pandemic, adjusting primarily for the safety of their employees and their customers and their families and their employees' families. Once we get through the uncertainty zone, so backing that up, we're not out of it yet, we would get into a new comfort zone. And I don't think we're at that point where we're reaching into that comfort zone, but I think we have a sense of we're moving into the future. Perhaps it's not as bad as what we initially thought. There's good news with the vaccines. There's good news in some places with the curves. So we have a tendency to look at that future and say, maybe we'll get there. Inside this diagram, there's 2 things that take place. One is a trigger event. So every time we go through a transition in our lives, it affects us emotionally and mentally and psychologically. There's a trigger event. That could be the birth of a baby, could be a marriage, could be the purchase of a new house, could be a new career, could be a loss of someone, could be a serious illness in the family. But there's a trigger event that takes us out of our comfort zone and puts us into the uncertainty zone, sometimes temporarily. So for example, if there's someone that's sick or someone's passed away in your life, we go through that grieving process, and generally we'll come back to that comfort zone, or we'll have a modified new comfort zone in the future where we know that we're missing that person, but our life has to go on. At the other end, there's a point that we need that's very important, and we're going to do a quick video on it in a minute. It's called the Rubicon Gap. In the 12 BC, Julius Caesar had his army lined up on the Rubicon River, and he had been on a search of capturing lands all through Central and Western Europe, and he had come to the border of Rome, and his arch enemy was the leader at Rome, living in Rome. And the rule of the armies, the 2 armies, was if they crossed that Rubicon River, they had to choose to continue to fight or to come back. And if they came back, their own country would take them, execute them, or put them in jail. So when he crossed that river, it became known as crossing the Rubicon Gap. Okay, not Gap, crossing the Rubicon Gap. And what we're doing is making that final decision. Once we cross that river, there's no going back. We can only go forward into the direction that we want. So I'd like to show you a quick video right now. Share my screen down here. And it's about a process that we'll talk about once it's over. Come on, mouse, you can work. There we go. And there we have it, Ringling Brothers. I like that video primarily because these guys are, and women are phenomenal athletes. But one of the things that they demonstrate is the power to let go. And we're going to use that in a minute and with one of our activities. But it's the power to let go. Once they launch from the pad that they're on and they reach out to that trapeze, they know they have to catch that trapeze. And once they're swinging, they let go, they know that they have to be able to get the next trapeze or be caught by that other person. So there's that point of no return. Once they've let go, they're committed to the future and can't go back. And so there's a tremendous amount of trust that needs to be built into that process. And that's one of the things that we find as human beings very difficult sometimes to trust that where we're going into our future is the place that we need to be going. It's the place that is the best for us in our future. So again, the athletes in that video were basically letting go hundreds of times throughout their practice and through the show. And it became a point where it was easy to let go. So grab your rubber bands, if you have one. Hairband out of your hair if you have one, good. Start with your rubber band in the right hand, on your left hand. Grip the rubber band, and I want that to be your current comfort zone. This is where you are right now. And start to stretch the rubber band. And as you start to stretch it, you will begin to feel a pullback. What's happening is we feel the stress of wanting to return to our comfort zone, much like we do right now during the pandemic. We want our comfort zone very bad, and we want that new comfort zone to be very, very similar to what we had. So we stretch forward into that uncertainty zone. And as long as we're connected to two, our new future and our old future, we're in the uncertainty zone. What happens in normal life is we have a purpose, and our purpose pulls us into the future, and our comfort zone adjusts and gets revised and moves with us. And then at some point in our lives, we stretch out our comfort zone again. Every time we stretch that rubber band, we're stretching the boundaries of our comfort zone, which is an important thing. It's a period of constant growth throughout our lives. So we're going to take the rubber band and adjust it a little bit more. In your left-hand side, the rubber band, grip it so that you can let it go. And stretch the rubber band out as far as you can. And we know just by the video that we watched and looking at the transition model that the Rubicon Gap is coming up, and we need to make a decision that we can't return from. So just let that rubber band go, and you'll feel a little bit of pain, which is normal. That's similar to the pain that we feel when we let something go in our past. We know that those memories aren't there. We know those feelings aren't there. but we've got this new set of feelings coming forward that we can adjust to and learn to love and to be with them. So again, we stretch it out. One thing I'd like to point to you right now is, as long as we're in two camps, and I think this is significant for the pandemic at this point, is that we have a lot of procrastination going on. We can't move forward very far, and we can't go back, and so here we are. And if we look at that from an employee standpoint, or even from your own standpoint as a leader, if you're not making decisions and moving forward, you're using energy just by being held apart like this. So think about a project that you push off into the future, or think about work that you haven't got done, or your to-do list that's 5 days old. So as long as we're out here, this is costing us energy. But I can assure you that the energy that you're expending by procrastinating or being in the middle is a lot less than the energy of letting the rubber band go and having that little bit of pain and getting over it as quickly as possible. So again, looking at this as the beginning, the uncertainty zone, and then being in the new beginning. We have all those tensions being pulled back and forth until we make that final decision. So we have a breakout room coming out. Mike, if you're ready for me. Down at the bottom, throughout the workbook, I provided a series of questions for you, and a couple of them are in breakout rooms. The rest you don't have to answer. They're all on page 11 and 12. And I put them there so that if you would like to answer those questions, you can scan them, not fax them. That's my generation. You can scan them and send them to me, and we can speak for 30 to 45 minutes about any questions you have, and we can set up an appointment and just talk over the phone or whatever. So we're going to talk about some of them here, but you can actually answer them, send them to me, and I'll provide you with some complimentary time to follow up with you, which will be a lot of fun. So the first breakout question, Mike, is what do we need to let go of in order to be drawn into our future, and why? So again, what do you need to let go of in order to be drawn into your future, and why? Any feedback from what you had to let go of in your groups? Were there any surprises, or who can just share one thing that they feel they had to let go of? And we can relate it to the pandemic, or probably that, because it's just the biggest feature of our lives right now. I went in my group, so I can share one here if I can get that to encourage somebody else to share them. And here's that rubber band stretching that comfort zone, people stretching the comfort zone. So one of the things that I got knocked off balance with in my business is I do a lot of people work. My clients are all in person. So I have a small consulting coaching business. And when the pandemic hit, I lost that ability to connect with the people that I knew in person, although some of them I continued with. So I lost that piece, and I literally had to let go of it. There was no way around it. There was no way to even go into some of the businesses with a mask. And as things started to lighten up a little bit over the summer, now I do have clients where I can meet in person, but I literally had to give up fighting to hold on to that and do this, embrace the technology, with my sons teaching me how to do this and my daughters teaching me how to do this. So that was something that I had to let go of. Anybody else?
There's a good comment in my room about only, letting go of the things you can't control and letting go of negative people.
Yes. Yes, and that's a difficult thing to do, especially if they happen to be family or close friends and things have changed.
I think for us in our room, letting go of control was a big thing. The example that sort of came up, one of them was Christmas. To not have that control, to not know what you're planning, to just kind of accept that it's out of control right now.
Yeah.
And go of that feeling that you have to control everything. And something I thought was really interesting, one of the girls in our room, she sets aside a worry time. So from 4 to 5, she's allowed to worry about stuff. If something comes up during the day, it's like, no, I'll worry about that at 4 o'clock. And then 4 o'clock rolls around and it's not such a big deal anymore. So I thought that was a really cool kind of technique.
What a great strategy. I think my wife sometimes has her worry time at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I know that's when mine occurs, when I start chasing rabbits down the hole, wondering what's going on for the day. That's a great strategy. Thank you. Let's turn over to page 5. And here we're going to start looking at the 4 psychological needs that that I've researched that are, I feel, the basis of what our minds need, our mental health needs, in order for us to stay balanced on what we're doing. At the top of the page, when we start talking about employee engagement, there are things like customer loyalty, customer experience, leadership development, employee retention and satisfaction. And those are all behavioral things that we can see above the line. So those are all the physical aspects that we can see. But the research that I've done for my master's and from writing this book is that below the surface, there are 4 psychological needs. And what I've done is put them into the format of a 3-legged stool. And on the surface, the top of the stool is purpose. And purpose is that sense of binding all of the legs together. Even though the legs support that stool, it's binding those legs together. So there are lots of good books and lots of good tools that measure employee engagement, but I couldn't find one that just focused on these 4 psychological needs. So the second psychological need is the need for control, which was just mentioned. We don't have any control going forward. And this is one of the ones that was really impacted by in March and April, when things were really rough and no one knew where they're going. And even right now, we have no idea what's going to happen for Christmas. We didn't know what was going on for New Year's or Halloween. So that sense of control is, do I have some autonomy and independence in my life? And I need that to take my life in the directions that I want it to go. The third psychological need is competence. We're born with a natural set of skills and interests that we like to have. And so we move from one area of our lives to the other, and we want this continual learning process. And if we're at work, we want to be using a good portion of the day some of those skills that make us feel good, that time just allows us to pass, that puts us in kind of that flow state that we really like doing. The pandemic has really hit this one in terms of when it hit, we didn't have any skills, we didn't have any knowledge, and our level of competence was really challenged. And once that's challenged at a survival level, it's easily has an impact on just having that competence and confidence to go through your workday. And that fourth psychological need is connection. And I believe this one is second to purpose. And I say that because connection is belonging to a group of people that have meaning to you, people that are on your team, your family, your extended family. For me, that connection was as much to a lot of loyal clients that I've had over the years that are still with me. The inability to go visit my mother in Calgary and in Okotoks to see my family because, well, we did, but we had the garage things. We're 6 feet apart in a cold garage with a space heater on, trying to have a rum and Coke and enjoy our visit. So it was definitely a challenge doing that. So that whole area of connection. There we go, I'm back. These 4 connections are as important to the mind as the 4 core needs that we have for our body. So we need air, food, water, and shelter. Those are our core physical needs. And through looking at the concept of self-determination theory during my master's program, I've drilled down to what I believe are the 4 core needs of our mental well-being. And that's having that sense of purpose, having that sense of autonomy or independence, having the ability to use our natural skills, and also that sense of connection to not only people, but a connection to our purpose or to someone else's purpose, our organization's purpose, or connection to our organization's values. So they're very important. Take a look at the little guy we brought back again up in the corner. Public enemy number one now has a name. His name is frustration. And frustration costs the economy $356 billion, and we don't know he's there. He works below the surface most of the time. And what's he doing? Frustration looks like this. We can be angry, we can pull back, we can feel anxious, we can feel irate, we can feel irritable, we can feel out of sync with ourselves. We can have a feeling of not knowing particularly where we're going because those psychological needs aren't getting met. So frustration, as soon as that starts to happen, has a direct impact on our mental well-being. Direct, not on the outside, but direct, because it's connected to the 4 needs that we need to have in order to have a well-balanced life. So when we talk about a sense of purpose, when it's frustrated, we don't have a direction in our lives. When we talk about connection, like we have now, and we're difficult to connect with people, we begin to feel that loss. So to remember importantly, only one of those 4 psychological needs needs to be ineffectively being met. Doesn't need 2 or 3 or 4, just one starts to drag us down. And that's that whole area of our mental health. And as most of you know from your experiences in the profession and owning businesses and working with employees, that once your mental health starts to slide, so does your physical health. And that's a dangerous position for us to be in. So any questions on that, just pop them into the chat room. I'd like to go over to page 6 and we'll start dissecting the stool. So the seat of the stool has been impacted by the pandemic. We've all been knocked off purpose. I'll give you an example of myself. As I walked in, as we marched into this pandemic, knowing that I had my business the way it was, and I was trying to continue to grow it forward as all businesses do. Pandemic came in, lockdown, no contact, lots of fear. And so I was knocked totally off my purpose. I didn't lose it, but I lost the way to get there and I couldn't find it. And so I was back in survival mode. How do I make this thing work? So purpose has the following characteristics. Knowing that you're making a significant difference in the lives of others. It's an external focus, not internal. It's knowing why the organization you work for does what it does or why you live your life the way you do. It's different from vision and mission. A vision tells me where I want to be, and a mission tells me in big pictures what I have to do to get there. So I have the where and the what. Underlying it is why. And so that why is essentially our purpose statement. And one of the things that I've noticed in working in this area for the last 3 or 4 years is that purpose changes. We think that we have to identify this purpose for our business or our organization, and that's going to be it for the next 10 years, or we define a purpose for our lives and we think that's going to be it for the 10 years. What I found in working with a variety of different candidates or clients is that their purpose is still in a general area, but the specifics of it will change in terms of who they want to help or what impact they want to have. Heard a good on a podcast last night, the values for one individual was family, impact, and abundance. So that's a good 3 words to remember for him to say family first, my impact on what I'm doing, and abundance for the world. And that's his purpose. Those are the values that support his purpose. So I'm going to show you a video right now just to cement this image of how important purpose is. It needs to be driven. It's difficult to drive. I'm going to show it to you twice if I can find my share screen. There we go. Come on, mouse.
Technology is not our friend today, is it, Dana?
No, it's the mouse.
There you go.
That's okay. It's only a mouse. Here we go. The most works when you don't want it to. So there we have it. I'm going to repeat that for you without the sound and do you a little play-by-play of the whole video, just to attach it to the concept of purpose for us. We have an osprey that's fishing, obviously hungry, obviously has a purpose. I want to talk about it in more theoretical terms in our purpose. When we find something, we decide that we're going to dive in, make that decision to go in. And here he's just flipping along, picking the low-hanging fruit, really not making an effort, just picking up the fingerlings, much as we do through a lot of our life if we don't focus on purpose. Now he's hunting for the bigger fish. And the next one target is going to be the flatfish that's on the bottom of this cove. Watch his talons, they're hanging down as they go back, and then they will go forward. And once he hits the forward part, at that point, he's beyond the point of no return. He's made his decision, he's made his commitment, much like we do when we let that rubber band go. We drive into that unknown and capture whatever we can in terms of where we were going with our purpose. As he's flying, he starts to shake off all of the excess water. And to us, that's a signal to me when I always see that image that I need to stop every now and then and shake off the road dust, get rid of the emails and get rid of all the other stuff and just take a break and do it quite often. So here he goes in again, the point of no return. This time when he comes out, he's going to pull a bigger fish. So he's got this goal or he's got this purpose under him, but it's a very difficult to get it going. So being on purpose is not necessarily an easy thing to do in our lives. It can be messy. You can see him dragging it along, trying to lift it out of the water, with a lot of impact. So much like COVID is impacting us, I'm trying to live on purpose. If you look, he's only got one leg on the fish. And again, he's been knocked off purpose, much like we have. He's struggling to get that second leg onto that fish and hang on to it. And that's kind of how we feel right now in terms of the pandemic is, when can I get both legs back on track and where am I going? And you'll see then that eventually there gets a hold of it. He's got it back on track and his flight is a lot easier. So as we look at that, it's a sense of purpose is a long game. It's not just something that's short. And I'm going to see if I can unshare my screen. There I go, I'm back. So I want you to keep some of those images in your mind of the difficulty of catching those fish and the parallels with what we have are going through. And that can impact anything. That could be a divorce someone's going through. It can be a career change that somebody's going through. It could be any myriad of changes in our lives. I just happen to be speaking about the pandemic one at this point. At the bottom or in the middle of the page, I've left you 4 questions, discovery questions 2, 3, and 4, and 5. So again, you can answer those on pages 11 and 12. And if you'd like to scan them to me, again, I'll spend 30 to 45 minutes with you talking about your answers and answering any questions. So at this point, let's move over to page 7. We'll talk about the other 3 psychological needs. The first one is control that we'd like to talk about. And control, as we've talked about, is that level of independence and autonomy. And this one has really been impacted almost immediately when we went into the pandemic. So if we look back at the rubber band analogy, the rubber band, most of the time I feel pulled into the purpose, into my future with my purpose. It's a magnet. In this particular case, we have been slammed into the future by the pandemic, unwillingly and fearfully into the future, trying to figure out what's going on. So it wasn't intent, it was reaction. When we look at competence, we look in our jobs, we like to have the ability to have the opportunity to use our skills, our talents to the best we can. We like to learn new things, and we like to have regular performance conversations. And 2 of the organizations that I'm working with right now, we used the survey that I'd created, and in both organizations, it came out that the employees wanted more feedback on what they were doing. They didn't have clear job descriptions. and they didn't have the performance expectations that they could look at and say, here's my boundaries, here's what I need to do to be successful. And once I'm successful, my mental well-being is up and my engagement is up. The last need is a need for connection. And again, this one was really hammered and had a large impact on people across the world in terms of not only their workspace and not only for employers and employees, but families and extended families. And here we want to feel like we're connected to something that's bigger than us. We want to feel connected to a group of people. This is a prehistoric trait that we have. When man first landed on the grasslands, we lived in small troops and bands and tribes, and it was that connection and safety to those other people that ensured our survival. So we've got a breakout question coming up right now, Mike, if you're ready. For you, which of these 4 psychological needs, purpose, control, competence, and connection, have been affected by the pandemic, and how is it affected?
Comes back.
Yep.
All right.
Good. So we had an interesting discussion in our group, and it looked like connection was one of the areas that was impacted the most, and in one case, competence, in terms of just being new on the job and the pressure that was placed on the position. So did anybody else have something to share from their group that was kind of a common theme?
I can share from our group.
Hey?
I can share from our group if that's all right. We talked about the connection piece as well. It's just, even though there's lots of virtual options, it feels a little bit different. And the control piece and how challenging that can be in positions where you have to do a lot of planning and have responsibilities for many staff and many locations. It's really hard to actually plan how you're going to run your business when that could change at the drop of a hat.
Right.
The control piece.
That's good. I find that even now with my own business, when I'm prospecting, that I'm not looking at things that are a year out. It's usually 6 weeks or 6-month engagements type of thing. Because people, as you say, can't plan for what they don't know. Good, thank you. Any other comments from the groups? Nope. Okay. Let's move on over to page 6. And Mike, I know that we're running up to our time limits here, so I'm going to shorten some of this up a little bit. Or sorry, on page 8. On page 8 is what I laid out as an employee engagement plan, a very brief set of actions that you can take. Ask the discovery question that, why does my business do what it does? And if you include your employees and say, why, besides making a profit, why does my organization do what it does? You will find a huge variety of answers, and you will find a lot of disparity between the employees in your organization, your business. And that can be one of the reasons for not having that sense of purpose and direction. Even though a purpose statement may be there or a vision statement may be there, if it's not integrated, if it's not clear, if it's not concise and short, less than 10 words, then people will come up with different answers. So the alignment then that's the first question you can ask to look for alignment in your company. There's an employee engagement survey. There's 2 versions of it that I created for the 4 core needs. One is for free on my website. It's the brief version of it at www.rippledynamics.com. That's on the last page of your book. And there's an advanced version that I've created and tested and that I can connect with you. You can connect with me to see if you would like to implement that. Second step is, once you have that information, look at team discussions, making sure they're involved in it. That's all part of the engagement process. Then when it says an engagement plan on the right-hand side, by that I mean 6 or 7 action items listed on a piece of paper. We don't need the goals and the responsibilities and the strategies and everything else that goes with it. Just some 6 action items that you can accomplish in 6 months. A pulse check. We want to make sure that we're going where we want to go. So we set these 6 action tasks. We don't want to wait until we get to the 6-month mark and say, gee, I wish we'd have met partway through, because we probably would have changed the focus of this particular item. The last thing is, you do a 6-month review of that 6 action items, do a 6-month review of it, and look at the progress you made. And then, as all companies can do, celebrate and have a great time at what you did, readjust, and set off for another 6 months. As I mentioned in the video, purpose and engagement are long games, they're not short games. people are coming and going out of your organization, economies are changing. So our level of engagement is always in flux, and we always have to make sure that we're looking after our employee mental health. I'm going to move past the purpose statement. It's pretty self-explanatory what I've left there for you. So I want to make sure that we are cognizant of our time. And over to page 10. One of the things that we encounter particularly now, but I think is even prior to the media and the life that we live in, is the amount of negativity that we live in. And in order to work in our organizations requires a tremendous amount of optimism all the time. And one of the things that we fight in our own brain is something called a negativity bias. And it's something that's left over from prehistoric man that continues to be part of our genetic makeup. And the negativity bias is basically, we notice what's negative in our environment first. Before we notice anything else, we'll know what's negative in our environment because it's a challenge to our survival for prehistoric man. If we weren't paying attention to what was shaking in that bush, we could be some lion's lunch, or it simply could be a bird flying out. But first off, it was that negative reaction. We still do that today. The media capitalizes on it. Advertising capitalizes on it. They look at the negative things and how do we insert that into people's lives. So that negativity bias is with us today, and we need to know that it's part of us and it's part of the people around us. So one of the organizations that I'm working with right now, I said, not only do we have the negativity and bias impacting on us, but as our customers are coming in, we don't know what they've read in the media. We don't know what they've heard in the media. We don't know if somebody cut them off in traffic. We don't know what negative experiences they've come in. So our job as leaders and managers and owners is basically to infuse every meeting automatically upfront with that sense of optimism. Hi, how are you doing today? Is there anything I can do for you? How's your health? Anything but following the negative conversation that goes through it. Here's a ratio that you need to remember, 5 to 1. In the research, it shows that we need 5 positive interactions to overcome 1 negative interaction. So you think of all of the negative interactions that we have throughout a day, along with the positive ones. And when you start multiplying each one of those by 5, that creates a huge need for us to be optimistic and positive about what we're doing. So Mike's got his poll going. We'll let that continue to go. Off to the side for me. Right now, I just want to give you a sense of what that extreme optimism can look like. A short 1-minute video, and it's a sense of extreme optimism. If I can get my mouse on the spot.
I've been waiting for this, Data.
Hey?
I've been waiting for this video.
Oh, okay.
My favorite.
What do you think the chances are of a guy like you and a girl like me ending up together?
Well, Lloyd, that's difficult to say, and we really don't...
Hit me with it. Just give it to me straight. I came a long way just to see you married. Just least you can do is level with me. What are my chances?
Not good.
You mean not good like 1 out of 100?
I'd say more like 1 out of 1,000,000.
So you're telling me there's a chance? Yeah!
So there is a chance, 1 in a million. Our friend Jim has given us a good message. The last message I want to leave is those 3 words that we connected with: purpose, wellness, and profitability. You can see the thread of mental wellness being used to thread all 3 of those together. Purpose, 2 types of wellness, the physical and the mental wellness. And last of all, the profitability of the traditional side, but also that investment in our people. So with that, I will leave Mike to help me direct any questions that are there. One of the things that I'd like to pull to your attention before we do that, Mike, page 11 and 12 in your handout, you can fill out some or all of those questions. I just about said fax it, but I didn't. Scan it to me, and then I can connect with you. We can have a discussion. And last but not least, if you'd like a copy of my book, Three-Legged Stool, it's on the last page and how to connect with me. So awesome, and thanks for all your input. It's been a great time. Thanks, Mike.